The change is that software of the previous decade was really meant for humans, every go-to-market person, to use to get work done. That is what software was used for. Now, what agentic technology does is that it not only helps you get more work done, it actually does work on your behalf.
What does it look like to be a professional in the future where you will potentially be managing a team of agents?
I think in the future, you are going to have many of these agents that will help you get work done. So I might say, I have an agent that briefs me every day in the morning. And then I could have a meeting preparation agent. I think the future is, each of us, in order to be more productive, we can depend on agents to get work done on our behalf.
Welcome back to another episode of Growth Unlocked. I'm your host, Kieran Krohn. Today, my guest has led one of the most decisive AI pivots in B2B SaaS. As CEO of HubSpot, she made a call in January 2023 that would reshape the entire company and I think set the benchmark for how enterprise software should respond to AI disruption. Yamini Rangan leads what HubSpot is building as the leading agentic customer platform for scaling companies. And she's here today to talk about what the AI shift means for go-to-market teams and what the next era of revenue growth looks like. Yamini, welcome to Growth Unlocked.
Kieran, so glad to be here. I am thrilled that I'm talking to you, also because you are a former HubSpotter, so doubly excited for it.
Amazing. Yeah, it's been a long time coming, so I'm super excited. So, Yamini, you've now been CEO for 5 years, and you've led HubSpot through probably one of the biggest strategic pivots that arguably like any public SaaS company has had to make in recent memory. Which is no small feat. I guess if you had to describe what the last 5 years taught you about leading through uncertainty, what would you say?
Wow. The last 5 years have been a roller coaster ride, Kieran. If you can imagine like a pandemic that happens once, maybe every 100 years, happened, at the same time. You were there for it, and it was like a pretty big shift. The downturn following the pandemic was totally not a surprise. It was a correction after the massive acceleration that happened. And as we were going through that downturn, we are seeing AI become such a transformative, new shift within the industry. And these types of shifts happen maybe once every 15 to 20 years. So we've had things that happen once a century, things that happen every 20 years, all happen in the last 5 years. And so it has been definitely a big roller coaster ride. I think what it has taught me, which is the important part of the question, it's taught me that through all of this, businesses go through a lot. And especially in cycles like this, it goes through a lot. You got to focus on one North Star. And for HubSpot, that North Star has been solving for the customer. And I've never been more reminded of how important that North Star is, Kieran. Whether it was the pandemic, like when we started making the decisions, we were aligned on what do small and medium businesses need in order to drive through this. And now, as we are going through the platform shift, it's not about technology, but it's about being really focused and grounded on how to really look at the bringing the technology for customers. And so it's taught me more than ever to have one and only one North Star, which is focusing on customers and customer value.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's one thing that I always remember when I was at HubSpot is you being very clear about, making that message and delivering it with clarity and focus to the team about sort of what that North Star looks like. And I think it's very easy for businesses and business leaders to be distracted. I know I am sometimes with all these new tools that are coming out, like at this breakneck speed in terms of things that are just changing so fast, like faster than ever before. And so I think having that laser focus on the North Star is what's really been kind of driving HubSpot in the right direction. And so I can imagine that in a way helps you to, I guess, avoid these distractions because there must be different things trying to pull you in different directions, and everyone has different opinions, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Kiran. So, it gives you a very, very clear and grounded lens through which you look at technology. Like now, every day there is a new model with a new capability, a new tool, a new personal assistant, something else. And, when you see all of this coming at you, especially at the pace at which it's coming at you, you need one grounding lens. And for us at HubSpot, and certainly for me as I make decisions, it is what can add value to help our customers grow. And then when you get that input, you can really easily evaluate that technology change or the new capability and say, what does that allow us to deliver for our customer? Our customer is not typically looking at every model capability, every new piece of technology that's coming out. How can we take it and democratize it for the segment that we serve? That has always been the unique sauce at HubSpot, taking technology and taking it and democratizing it for a small and medium, segment of the customer. And so it becomes like a little bit easier lens, I would say. Not easy on a day-to-day basis, but definitely a better lens to use.
Mm. And I can empathize with, I guess, the challenges that you must have had kind of stepping into that role as the leader of a company that had to go through such massive change during COVID and now through this transition with AI. So, I just got to say that I've got a massive amount of appreciation and respect for anyone that can do what you do to go through these times and stay focused and keep things moving in the right direction.
Thank you. Thank you. Not an easy task, but also, we have a lot of great things at HubSpot to work with. And that, our customers depend on us. We have 300,000 customers nearly globally right now. And it's pretty easy to get drowned by everything else that's happening. But, we just need to be laser focused on delivering for customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in January 2023, I think it was, Yamini, you scrapped the whole product roadmap that had been built, which is pretty wild. And you told your team that you're going to be pivoting to AI. Yeah, that's obviously not a small decision to make for a public company, like you said, with around about 300,000 customers now. What was the conversation that happened in the room? And I guess what gave you the conviction to move that fast?
Okay, this is, you were there. So I think November 2022 was a pretty pivotal moment, right? Like, ChatGPT came out, millions of, folks that were just on it very, very quickly. And I was one of those, 800 million folks like using it all day, every day in December. And, you know, um, by the time we got into the new year, and I wouldn't say it was January, it's in the first quarter of the year, Kiran, we asked ourselves a very, very simple question. And that simple question is this technology incremental, or do we think that this is a platform shift? And that question is really, really important because when you think or when you believe it is an incremental shift, you'll kind of keep going along the same path. By the time we got to the board meeting in Q1, we had very clear conviction that this technology is a platform shift. And therefore, every plan that we had, everything in the roadmap just became irrelevant because it was pointing towards a very different future. And that simple question of, is this incremental or is this platform shift? The answer is super clear. It was super clear to us. And therefore, we said, you know what? We now need to go towards a very different future. And we changed our roadmap. As you probably remember, in March of 2023, we launched our first set of AI features. The first chat spot that Dharmesh did, we launched in March, and the first set of content capabilities that we launched with AI were in March, and it was a completely different future. So sometimes, asking super simple questions provides clarity and the conviction that you need in order to pivot and, really point the company in a very different direction.
Mm. So it sounded like it was not really a hard decision to make then. It was pretty obvious what needed to happen.
It was obvious. It was obvious that it was a platform shift. That was like super clear from the minute we all started like using it, it was very clear. It was not obvious what exactly to build and how exactly to take the company through a very, very different process, right? That was just not obvious at all. The first instinct, because ChatGPT was a conversational interface, and now millions of people were using a conversational interface like ChatGPT to get answers, our first instinct was we're going to have a conversational interface, and that's why we put ChatGPT, and then we also provided a lot of the features that we needed too. But turns out that conversational interfaces took a while, right? It took on the consumer side, it was pretty easy. On the business side, you needed to build the right context around it. You needed to get people, people got stuck with a blank prompt surface. So you needed to actually give them prompts to write the prompts, right? Like you needed to actually teach them how to prompt, and you needed to give them a clear way of asking the next question. And those were all things that we needed to do. Plus, I think internally as well, Kieran, you were there at the time. While it was obvious to us that it was a platform shift, it was not obvious to everybody. And at that time, I had a lot of these questions of like, "Hey, is this just a next new fad, or is this going to go away like some other fad technology? And should I really lean into it? And how do we get going?" So internally, we had to create the momentum. We had small pockets of believers, and we saw that anybody who was leaning in started to get productivity improvement, whether you were a developer using GitHub Copilot at that time or someone within the go-to-market that was experimenting. And we then used those to showcase, and we said, okay, go for it. Do not send us memos. Just let 1,000 flowers bloom. That was the year one philosophy. And it was like getting people to adopt, getting people to kind of see the magic of the new platform shift. And of course, since then, we've had to like really identify what the strategy is and how we are going to transform. But we've now had to transform our entire platform. And we can talk about that. We've had to transform pricing. Pricing used to be subscription and seat based, and now it's very much hybrid with credit based. And we've had to transform the go to market all at the same time, and that's a lot of change to take an entire company through, but that's the journey that we are in. And it's part exciting and part terrifying. It's exciting because of the promise of the technology. It's somewhat terrifying because there's no answers. It's not like everybody has done it before and there's a clear playbook. As we go through, we're figuring it out. And so a lot of times we've made calls and then we've had to like go back and redo something or relearn something. So that process has been, quite an interesting ride.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, even back in 2023, when you made that call and people were just interacting with this chat interface, it was probably not that obvious that we're going to move into this agentic world where we were going to have agents that can essentially run autonomously and they can be given goals that they need to achieve. And what I really find fascinating, and we'll get to this at some part of the conversation, this concept of the agentic customer platform where,
Yep.
I think because we are working a lot with customers on HubSpot and we use it ourselves daily, is I can see this world that we're moving towards. It's already available, largely through HubSpot, but it's going to continue to evolve in this direction around having this workforce that's a mix of people and machines working together, right?
Absolutely.
And I think what's like really fascinating and maybe in some ways confronting for some people is, what does it look like to be a professional in the future where you will potentially be managing a team of agents, right? Or like working alongside these agents that will be completing certain tasks within the actual sort of business workflow. And that's a world that no one has seen before, right? Like you said, this is like on the frontier that no one knows what that looks like.
Right.
What are your thoughts around that in terms of like what the future of the workforce looks like from a go-to-market perspective?
I mean, it is so interesting, Kieran. If you really step back, what is the change? The change is that software of the previous decade was really meant for humans, you, me, every go-to-market person to use to get work done. That is what software was used for. Now, what agentic technology, the fancy name does is that it not only helps you get more work done, it actually does work on your behalf. I think that's what you meant as like autonomous tasks. But that is the fundamental shift with AI is it's gone from, just helping you. Software has gone from just helping you get work done to doing work for you. Now, that has a lot of implications, and we're seeing those implications play out. We got used to AI being assistive, which means, you ask AI to complete writing for you or complete content generation for you or complete code for you. And it assisted you in doing it. And now you are asking AI to get work done on your behalf. Now, it sounds, a little bit scary of like, oh, you're managing agents and you're asking autonomous agents to go and get work done. I don't think it's like necessarily that scary. The way I break it down when I talk to customers is that think about your job as a sales rep. When you were in sales and when I was in sales, we got, a set of accounts. What did we do when we got a set of accounts at the beginning of the year? We would actually research it. You would go to 10Ks, 10Qs. You would look at the company. You would look at like who the key people were. You'd try to map the organization. And then you would look for signals. Did they just get funding? Or did you see if they were coming to your website? And you tried to do all of this manually. And here's the secret in sales, right? If you had 100 accounts, you probably covered 20 accounts really well. If you had 500 accounts, you probably covered 100 accounts really well. It was never possible for you and me and for the entire sales organization to ever cover all of those accounts. But prospecting agent, which is an example of one of these autonomous agents, does exactly that. So you basically say, here are my accounts, go do all of this work and look at the signals and come and tell me the 20 accounts that I need to pay attention to today. Not, a week from now, not, 3 months from now. Today, based on the signals, based on what I am looking for in terms of ideal customer and prospect profiles, give me a list. And so the software actually goes, pulls all of this information, and then it gives you this list. And then you can say, okay, write me emails for that. And HubSpot allows you to bring the context of how you've communicated the value, how you talk to your customers, the tone, the brand voice that you have. It uses all of that to generate an email. You can then say, okay, that email looks good. Or you can say, well, I don't like the way that tone is here. Let me correct it and make sure you remember all of this. And then it remembers, right? So now you have an agent that is working on your behalf and it's getting work done. And that is the fundamental difference. Now use this in, content creation, use this in, an AI SDR that's answering questions, or support agent that's answering questions and resolving on your behalf. That's what is happening. Now, I think in the future, you are going to have many of these agents that will help you get work done. So I might say I have, an agent that briefs me every day in the morning. And as I'm getting ready, I have an agent that looks at my calendar, that looks at all my prep notes, and it's saying, hey, here's what it looks like. I could start with that. And then I could have a meeting preparation agent. Maybe I have a writing agent that knows exactly my voice. So I think the future is, each of us, in order to be more productive, we can depend on agents to get work done on our behalf. And that means we can do more, connection with customers, better relevance in terms of the message, better, use of our cognitive capabilities. That's kind of where I think the future is going.
It's such a good point. And I think that's what I'm most excited about, to be honest, is how this technology is going to, or should allow people to move up, I guess, the value chain in terms of the kind of things that they're working on, and instead of things that are, like you mentioned before, things that can be automated around doing research, etc. And I've absolutely been loving, I've got to say, Yamini, like more recently, I'm not technical, right? I'm not a developer, but I've got Claude running inside a terminal that's connected to HubSpot through MCP. I've got it connected to my Gmail, my calendar, our ClickUp, our Slack as well. And like, I'm actually finding myself really very like probably never been more excited to be a salesperson, like head of growth at ScaleStation, where I'm actually spending probably arguably like almost more of my time, if not maybe 50-50, like actually inside the CRM versus just working inside the terminal.
Yeah.
And this ability to chat with AI in natural language, to query things from HubSpot, to pull information, to do research, to do segmentation, to build messaging. Like my day yesterday was probably the most productive day I've had in my life. Like I did a reflection and look back on what I achieved in, a 9-hour period. And I was like, that is mind blowing. Like I would have not been able to do
What
that.
did you do, Kieran? I'm very curious. What were you able to accomplish in 9 hours, which you wouldn't have before?
Okay, it's a pretty long list, but we're focusing on two key verticals that we're going after, and I started to do deep research into one of those verticals to understand what the total addressable market is, where we can start to build partnerships with those associations within that industry. I then built a long form piece of content, like a pillar page that talks to the specific challenges of that industry. I then identified one association that has access to our ICP that we can start to build a relationship. I identified the people and decision makers that would be best to speak to about a partnership from those companies. I then wrote messaging personalized to those individuals that I can start to reach out to them. I built basically like an interactive tool that we can use to generate leads through our website. And there's probably some other things that I'm forgetting about as well.
And this was all in like 9 hours. That's incredible, isn't it? It's just like fascinating. And I think it's the same thing. Like if I look at the level of productivity that I have in a short period of time, I'm also on the side kind of like learning it all, right? Like we all feel like we have to catch up, and so I generally dedicate a couple of hours, at least an hour a day, where I am hands-on and something new, or I'm looking at a YouTube, channel and kind of like learning on the fly and then doing it. And I mean, that also takes time, but it's also, fantastic. I think that the stage that we are in with AI is that individually we are all getting more productive, right? Ability to write something or create content or analyze ICP or analyze a segment or go deep into like a vertical. We're getting. How do we translate that into institutional productivity? Like if you got better in your 9 hours and created more, how can ScaleStation get more productive because of that? How do you turn what you did into productivity at the company level? Because if you did that and that meant you're going to go into a vertical faster and that translates into, better growth, then that is great. And if like 10 people had to do exactly the things that you did and drive, much more growth, how would we enable that? That's where, the next stages, you got to go from individual productivity using AI to institutional or company-wide productivity using AI. And that's where I do think that platforms like, HubSpot can really help, because everybody is operating out of the same context. Everybody is operating from the same set of information that is, indexed and connected in a manner that is helpful, with AI.
It's a really good point that you raised, and I'd like to go into that, Yamini, around this. You're raising it to the institutional level and having kind of everyone ideally kind of moving in that direction and utilizing this technology to its full potential. How do you do that at HubSpot? I mean, you don't have a small team. I'm not sure what the employee numbers are now, probably close to 10,000. But I mean, it's a lot of people, and I guess everyone's kind of at a different stage of their maturity when it comes to this as well.
Yeah. First of all, I'll tell you how we do it within HubSpot as the platform, and then how we do it with HubSpot as a company, right? There are two angles to it. And the reason that I think this point is really important is that so it's been 3 years since the ChatGPT moment, right? Almost 3.5 years since the ChatGPT moment. And then you ask yourself, where have you seen the most, productivity? It has been in pockets. I could say coding, absolutely, right? Like no question, coding and development has gone through productivity. You can say support. But then there are a lot of tools and a lot of like AI slop, right? Just output that looks like someone generated it with 1 minute of AI prompting versus outcomes that drive growth within the business. And so I've now talked to so many customers that are in that AI adoption journey. And they're like, look, yeah, we got this output. And in fact, it actually added more volume. It added like more noise. But how do I translate that into actual growth? So there is a gap between just output with AI and outcomes that you drive with AI. And HubSpot, from our perspective, that gap is really context about who you are. Kieran, this is my role. These are the things that I have the ability to edit or to work on. This is what I can do within my given role. And then it is context about the business. Who am I within the context of the business? I'm a growth driver, and this is the business context, voice of the business, the tone, uh, who the competitors are, who your ideal customer profile is, how you communicate your ideal customer profile. That's the context about the business. And then the industry. Most of us operate in a certain industry with a certain language. You cannot say the same thing to a manufacturing customer that you can to a pharmaceutical customer, or a retail customer. They all have that industry context. How do you bring that together? Because think about this, like, in when you just humans getting work done, you come into a company. If you're in the manufacturing company, you get onboarded. You go through onboarding, you understand all of the tone, the customer, the competitor, the voice, how you speak, you get onboarded. But there's an agent, which is an AI. How does the agent get onboarded? The only way to onboard an agent is to deliver that level of context that makes the outputs not just slop, but actual outcomes. And that's really what we're building. And, this is the most exciting thing to do. It's like almost we have um, looked at the core architecture and we've really transformed it to bring all of the structured unstructured data to build this level of context. And so I think that's what helps with driving better outcomes, better support ticket resolutions, better campaign results, or better prospecting emails. That comes from having context in one place. And so I think that's our point of view in terms of the platform. And that's why you earlier mentioned this word, the agentic customer platform. That's what we really mean. It actually allows agents to operate with the context in order to be able to deliver the outcomes. And I think you asked another really interesting question, Kieran, which is like, how do you do this internally? How do you translate? And I'd say that we are still in the process. And this, from 2023, we went all the way in, not just on the product side. We, shared our ambitions with a whole organization. We said, here, go use, AI tools. So we started with enabling everybody with tools, right? So we started, the first version of it was Hub GPT. We tried to build, a layer on top of Chat GPT, and we gave that to everybody. And then we found that it didn't matter, like, everybody needed multiple tools. So we enabled everybody there. And I do think that from our own internal usage, we've gone through multiple phases. And I will say that how we build, how we grow, and how we operate has absolutely transformed. How we build, we've gone from code completion agents like GitHub Copilot to coding agents like Claude Code to now having a completely internally built, agentic platform on top of LLMs that allow our developers to bring, that particular stack that HubSpot is used to so that it's optimized. You're not using a generic coding agent, but it's optimized for HubSpot's environment that allows developers to be much more productive. We've done that, and we've seen just incremental, pace of innovation, but also quality of the output that we are delivering. In terms of go to market, we started with inbound chat. 85% of inbound chat is handled by AI agents. Support tickets, 70% are being handled, or actually 60% is being handled by, our internal customer support agents. And everything within sales, we have provided agents and assistants to improve prospecting, improve account outreach. And so really, excited to see the level of internal transformation. And that comes from having common tools and then providing clarity on which directions to go, and then really creating a culture of experimentation. As we started talking about this early, AI and where the journey that we're all going through, it's not necessarily a clear playbook. So you have to encourage people to experiment, and you have to encourage people to learn fast and be very, very curious. And when you do, the entire organization's productivity goes up.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. It's a lot of it's just around like shortening the loop around like testing, looking at the outcomes, seeing what the results look like, and then iterating from there, right? Like these kind of advancements with AI is really kind of compressing that time from test to iteration. And I
Yep.
think that the companies that are embracing it are the ones that are probably going to move fastest. Obviously, you need to have some kind of governance around what that loop looks like. But that I agree that I think like speed and velocity are one of these kind of things that probably a lot of go-to-market leaders and other CEOs would be thinking about, maybe potentially even a bit worried about and a bit anxious about in terms of thinking, like our competitors might be moving faster than us. And I guess this is probably something that a lot of leaders might be worried about these days, right? Around like, are we actually moving fast enough? But also, I guess, matching that pace with not just moving fast for the sake of it, but actually making the right bets in the right areas.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wake up every day thinking I'm not moving fast enough. And we need to find, another gear of, speed, another gear of like urgency. But I think what you said there is absolutely right. Like speed without direction is chaos. Speed with clarity of direction is, a force multiplier. And I think that's the thing that we have to be careful about is that, and we have done this, I can't say that we've done this perfectly, times where we've said like, run, go fast and let thousand flowers bloom. And people run in all kinds of chaotic direction. Everybody's, is excited. They're in Slack channels, sharing what they built and how they built it. And then you kind of like step back and look at it and you're kind of in the same place that you were before, which is chaos. And then you pull everybody back and say, okay, here are the 4 things that we want to do as an organization. And what is interesting about AI, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier in terms of the iterative loop and the nature of, iteration with AI, is that it's not about the number of features that you have within your product or your platform. It is the quality of that experience, right? I mean, you know the magical experience that you have when you do it and it responds exactly like you would have written or you would have wanted the answer, or your analysis that was exactly what you needed. Doing that is not 10 features, right? Doing that is just improving the quality of one output. And that is the iterative nature of AI. And so I think, like, going back to that point of speed, what we've tried to do is to really say speed is really directed at improving the quality of outcomes for customer rather than anything else. And that helps.
Yeah, yeah, it's really well said. Yeah, I mean, one thing that I loved in the last, I think, month or so was how Damesh published a piece back in February, and it was pretty eye opening, and I was really like, yes, like this is exactly what I would love to see from HubSpot. Is essentially calling this what is potentially like the second most major CRM transformation in the last 30 years. Yeah, HubSpot's coined this term now we spoke about before called the Agentic customer platform, and is moving to own that positioning. I guess, category creation isn't easy and it's a pretty major strategic bet to make.
Yeah.
What do you think it takes to make this kind of new category label stick rather than just becoming like marketing noise or hype? And how do you know when you've got it right?
Yeah, I've seen category creation, be wildly successful, and I've seen it like fizzle out to exactly that point. And I don't think that we are going into this intending to create a separate category. I think that was not even the intent. I think uh, to the earlier discussion we had, Kiran, the fundamental shift in CRM, in the last decade to CRM as it goes forward, is that the platform can deliver work, not just help you do work. And that is the agentic nature of the platform. If the platform that we delivered helped you get more things done so that you could grow, the platform that we are delivering now is fundamentally helping you do more work. And that's what we want to communicate. And that's the agentic nature. And that's why we're calling it the agentic customer platform. And what does it really mean? It means that you should expect us not only to bring structured data that a customer platform brings. Of course, it's the company and the contacts and the deals and the tickets and all of that information, but it should also bring all of the unstructured information about conversations. 80% of customer context lives in unstructured conversations. That could be emails, that could be like SMS, WhatsApp messages. It could be Zoom meetings that you have, or some kind of like video meeting you have. That is the context. So as an agentic customer platform, we want to bring your structured data. We want to bring all of your unstructured data. Well, why is that important? Because in order for an agent to do work on your behalf, it needs to know that full context. And what does that next layer do? Well, if you capture all of the call transcripts, then at the end of the call, the agent, and in this case, like HubSpot, can very easily say, hey, Yamini, it seems like you met Kieran today. This is his contact information. This is the highlight of the conversation that you have. Here's an email that you can send to thank him. And the CRM can actually now do more work, because when you started as a sales rep and I started as a sales rep, we would enter the contact information. We would capture the notes on the side notebook and we would go and write it into the CRM. And then we would like take an action item. And then 2 days later, we would send an email. The CRM now does all of that. That is agentic. And, so agentic in the nature of what we pull, what we enable customers to do, and what that means in terms of delivering growth. That is what an agentic customer platform is. And it's quite different from the last decade of what we were delivering. And that's all we want to indicate. We want to indicate the nature of what we're doing within the platform and within our agents to be able to help our customers grow.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, I guess to switch gears a little bit, you've talked about imposter syndrome in the past and vulnerability as, I guess, genuine leadership tools rather than just weakness to manage. You know, like we spoke about before, you're 5 years into this role as CEO now, at a moment where, things are just moving faster than they've ever moved before. I guess, where does self-doubt show up for you, and how do you work with it rather than against it?
I mean, every day. Like, I don't think there is a single leader that is self assured today in tech, where they know exactly what they're doing. They have like all of the answers. If there is, then I want to meet that person because I'm sure I can learn from them. So I think, like, you know, um, there's a general sense of imposter syndrome, which I really translate to this self doubt of, can I get this done? Right? That's really what I think about as imposter syndrome. And people have it when they step into big roles. People have it when they take on jobs that they've never done before. And for me, instead of dwelling in self doubt and questioning my own capabilities, I've kind of had this vision of working backwards from the future. So instead of looking at my past capabilities to then say, what am I capable of doing in the present? I look at like future world that I want to create, and then work backwards from there in terms of what I need to deliver. And, I've talked about this when I stepped into the role of HubSpot, as a CEO. Easy to completely get, overwhelmed by a sense of imposter syndrome. But then, I had this, what do we want HubSpot to look like? How do we help our customers grow? And how do I want to show up as a female leader, and support others to go through the journey that I have gone through? And if I need to do all of that, what are the kinds of things that I should be doing? And so create the future that you really aspire to create, and then match your actions today, every day, to get to that future. That's how I've always dealt with it. And, today with AI, it's an even bigger, issue, because there's not a lot of clarity. We have not seen this particular platform shift before. We can put some patterns to prior platform shifts, but it's going faster and moving much more quickly than ever before. And I think we're, as leaders, we are making bets that could change the trajectory of the company, and you cannot wait for complete information in order to make that bet, because partly it might become too late for you to make that bet. So you're making bets with incomplete information, and when you do that, you just kind of think about, is this a one door or a two door bet? If it's a two door bet, easy, make it and go fast, right? You don't need to wait, because if it's something is wrong, you can always come back. And if it's a single door bet, then of course spend a little bit more time. But even there, you just need speed. Inaction is terminal at this point. Inaction is the biggest risk, and you have to take the information that you have, even though it might not be perfect information, and you have to go forward, and you have to do it with a sense of vulnerability. Like I've certainly, with the leadership team that I work with every day, I'm like, look, I'm making this call. I have no idea. So, I might be wrong. And sometimes I go and tell them, hey, here's where I was wrong. And I learned from this, and I'm going to change how I do things differently. And I say this even to the company. It's like, um, like you don't need to be 100% right when you go through a transformative shift like this. You just need to learn faster than everybody else around you.
You mentioned a point before, Yamini, around sort of looking ahead to the future and kind of working backwards from that, which I can definitely relate to. I think it's something that's helped me a lot in my career. I mean, I'm curious, you've managed to get to this position now, which you really deserve, and doing a great job at. And I would wonder what it feels like to kind of think about what does your future look like, right? Because you're CEO of one of the most impressive software companies in the world. I mean, where do you see yourself in the next, say, like 5 or 10 years?
I have no idea, Kieran. I have no idea. I think that, it's like 5 years, 10 years ago, if you'd asked me the question, um, what would you have wanted to be and where you are? Uh, I would not have told you that I'd have the honor of, leading an organization like HubSpot that is so customer focused through a massive technology transformation like AI. I just wouldn't have been able to tell you that at all. I think that, what I want to do is I want to learn every day, and I want to remain very curious. And I want to, put myself in places that feel deeply uncomfortable because I don't know the answer, and figure out that answer. And I really want to coach and help other leaders, get to senior roles within their industries and their domains that I want. Like those are all the things that I would like to do, but where I'm going to be and where this journey takes me, it's your guess as well as my guess. And that's actually worked out for me in the sense that I've always uh, looked at life as a journey of learning and being curious, and trying to be the best at what you do. And even if you're not, you tried your best. Like, I want to leave everything, on the line. Like, every play is a play where I put 200% into that game, and every opportunity is a learning opportunity. Some I get right, many I get wrong, and that's also part of the journey.
Yeah, I think that curious nature is something that I've definitely noticed with you, and it's a really, I think it's a really admirable trait. Is someone that feels like they can always be learning, always be doing better, because it's that kind of compounding nature of just getting a little bit better, even if it's like 0.1% every day, every week, that really starts to stack up over time.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we had to round it out with maybe some advice or kind of looking ahead, if you were to want to instill or give one piece of actionable advice to say another CEO or a go-to-market leader that might be watching things shift pretty dramatically right now and isn't really sure sort of whether to move fast or to wait for clarity, what would you tell them?
That's a great question. Look, I think in moments like this, the question is not what's the right answer or trying to get to the right answer. It is how can we learn quick enough to get to that right answer. That's really the thing. And what I would say is inaction is not the right answer. The only way you're going to learn is by doing and moving and being curious. And so my advice is don't wait for the right answer. Learn your way into it.
Excellent. Yamini, thank you so much. It's been an absolutely enthralling conversation and have appreciated all of your perspectives. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate what you've done at HubSpot and looking forward to what the future looks like.
Thanks for being a wonderful partner. Thanks for being in the ecosystem. And thanks for having me on the call. Love the conversation, Kieran. Thank you.
Thanks, Yamini.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Growth Unlocked Beyond Scale. If you enjoyed the show, it would really be appreciated if you can leave a 5-star review wherever you consume your podcasts. And while you're there, why not subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future episodes? If you'd like to learn about how to drive profitable scale in your business, gain clarity on your direction, and improve your business valuation, click the link in the show notes to connect with Kieran.